Brought to you by Midwest Federal at the sign of the good tree to come to for shelter. Midwest Federal, serving this area with strength and stability since 1891. And by the American Dairy Association and the Minnesota Dairy Promotion Council, who suggest you make your meal sing with cheese. And by Perkins Restaurants.
How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? You have just heard the arrival of the Gold Medal Fast Freight.
Good afternoon, everybody. Time now for another weekly transcribed edition of your Farm Journal of the Air, featuring Larry Haig with up-to-the-minute...
Because with bad weather, we have school closings. Something of interest to everybody who has to
Elchin said he heard 2 shots, but he thought someone was shooting fireworks until he saw the blood on the president.
He's still going, and he's still fighting, and he gets the first out, and it's still standing at the 40, the 50, the 45, and out of bounds.
Real radio, WCCO.
I'm Charlie Boone.
And I'm Roger Erickson.
Real radio. Well, what is it?
Well, WCCO is as real to me as Uncle Bob or Aunt Agnes. Growing up on the farm, we had WCCO radio on from early morning chores till the last news at night. We got the news and weather and sports and school closings.
Oh, yeah.
Humor. It was a constant companion, and it still is today.
You know, moving here from California in the mid-50s, I felt a little cut off, and my dad, the Reverend Boone, said, "Son, if you want to keep in touch with the world, you tune to our radio station, WCCO."
Well, let's hear about our radio station. This is the story of one of America's great radio stations.
In the early 1920s, when radio first invaded homes here in the Midwest, much of the population lived on farms. On a clear night, you could hear the voices and sounds of WLAG radio broadcasting from the Oak Grove Hotel in the big city of Minneapolis.
The sound was a bit scratchy, but that didn't bother listeners. The radio provided an entertaining story or news from the outside world.
In 1924, Washburn Crosby Company bought the faltering WLAG, Washburn Crosby, later became General Mills, and changed the call letters to WCCO, Washburn Crosby Company. As the ink dried in the contract, Dr. Paul Johnson uttered those memorable words.
This is WCCO, the gold medal radio station.
WCCO-830 soon became the station for information, entertainment, and news of Lucky Lindy's historic flight. And in 1929, the completion of our first skyscraper, the Fauché Tower. And, of course, the first commercial.
So just like Wheaties, the best breakfast food in the land.
The big band sound was popular in those days, and WCCO broadcast live from the top floor of the Nicollet Hotel.
Radio signified progress. Bringing the world into your living room meant sharing important moments with your loved ones.
In the early 30s, unemployment hit 20% in the Twin Cities, 70% on the Iron Range. Yet 2/3 of all homes had radios. Most stayed home evenings, listening to the stars of the day.
Hello again, this is Jack Benny, the Earth Galloper, coming to you through the courtesy of the Daily Exterminator. All the news that's flipped to print.
By 1935, 3/4 of CCO's broadcasts came from the Columbia Broadcasting System in New York. CBS and other big networks hired comics, singers, and vaudeville acts to entertain, but also hired personalities, real people who could touch the listener as a friend or neighbor.
WCCO soon hired its own stable of personalities. Halsey Hall, Tina and Tim, Cedric Adams, and Cullen Card.
Birdie, little jellybule hopped upon my windowsill, cocked a shining eye and says, "When did you first fall in love with the old bean bag?"
Those successful early years helped WCCO Radio establish its local, personable reputation. People got what they wanted to hear. School closings, local big bands, personalities who could relate to their lifestyles.
Yes, let the stars shine from New York, but no one could teach us how to grow corn any better than right here. We'll be right back.
Our congratulations to you, WCCO Radio, for the 60 years of broadcasting. What a privilege it's been. We've enjoyed some of the best sports teams on your station and the best sportcasters like the late, great Halsey Hall. What a lucky area we live in to have the #1 station of its kind in the nation, a station that keeps getting better and growing stronger. You've got a good team, and we at Midwest Federal salute you on your 60 years of broadcasting to this great area of real radio, WCCO.
April 7th, 1938. 3 weeks after Hitler marched into Austria and the premiere of CBS World News Roundup, WCCO Radio moved to its present home in downtown Minneapolis.
It was state-of-the-art, with floating studios, audition rooms, and Art Deco lobby. But outside these soundproof walls, beyond the farms and hillsides of Minnesota, forces gathered in Europe that would send a ripple of fear through America and change the sound of radio in the 40s.
The war touched everyone. I first heard the news of the attack on Pearl Harbor while listening to WCCO. For many of us left alone to cope with families, it was a comfort to know we had a friend, the radio.
Well, good evening, everybody. Are you home tonight? Or are you over to Aunt Minnie's to see her quilting for the county fair? Are you holding your girl's hand? Well, if not, hold it.
I came out at 10:30, so it was an hour of variety and a dandy spot for this show, Friendly Time. And it opened with It's Friendly Time, and we'd play some music, and then I poured water from a beer glass into a drinking glass to get the sound of flowing beer. And beer didn't make a good sound. Water made a good sound.
Some say those were the best days of radio. Tickets for the live shows were free. The only price you paid was to listen to the commercials for Tasty Bread, Cargill Feeds, and Phillips Oil. The shows may have been hokey, but audiences loved the personalities.
It was star quality, all right. People knew us at a bank, at a grocery store, a cab driver. My name and the other fellows' names were instantly recognized.
Success was no secret to this 50,000-watt clear channel giant. Even though stars received the attention, listeners were always considered a part of the family.
Are you cooking with Crisco and sudsing with draft? This is Cedric Adams with your noontime news. A somewhat reluctant Congress...
If anyone made the listener feel at home, it was Cedric Adams. From Stairway to Stardom, to the Saturday night radio party, to his nightly newscasts, the man exemplified the real radio personality of this era. His simple, direct, but personal newscasts captured the largest ratings of any local show in the nation. When Cedric spoke, people listened.
I would see him in the lobby of CCO Radio after he was off the air. And usually there were 2, sometimes a dozen people who would come to the station to sit there and hear him on the speaker and then shake hands with him when he left, or they hoped to see him. He never passed them up, never took another way to avoid them.
Voice of America said that he was uniquely popular. They took a survey in Minnesota, and Cedric Adams, in the survey, proved to be more popular with people than almost anybody you could name, including the president of the country and the governor of the state.
Soap operas were also popular in the 40s. Shows like The Light of the World and Ma Perkins were hits. But during World War II, listeners wanted more from their radios.
In 1938, CBS created a news division with correspondents like Edward R. Murrow and Minneapolis newspaperman Eric Severai. WCCO did the same in 1943 and hired as news director Sig Mickelson, who later became president of CBS News. Mickelson trained his staff to report news as it happened.
And now here's your WCCO Farm Service Director, Larry Haig. Good afternoon, Larry.
Good afternoon, Frank, and good afternoon, everybody. Well, today is a big day for a select group of Minnesota and Wisconsin 4-H...
Almost since its birth, WCCO provided daily market figures from St. Paul and Minneapolis grain exchanges. But farmers needed and demanded more information. And as a result, WCCO hired a 33-year-old farmer named Larry Haig as first farm director. he traveled across the state to bring farmers the latest agricultural news. From there, Haig went on to the Minnesota legislature and later became one of WCCO Radio's most influential general managers.
The 40s were also a time of change. A young copywriter named Joyce Lamont was one of the first female air personalities on WCCO Radio.
And if it weren't for a program called Musical Chimes, well, kids just wouldn't know when to stay home from school.
The word powerhouse described WCCO Radio in the 40s. Local programs were successful. CBS offered big-name talent like Arthur Godfrey, Jack Benny, and Amos and Andy. The war was over, and for the first time, everything in CCO land seemed secure.
The 1950s. America's younger generation bebopped to the sound of a different drummer. Teenagers, as they were called, were growing in numbers and spending money like crazy. They were an advertiser's dream, and radio rallied to respond.
We didn't have any kind of competition from anybody. And then in the 50s, maybe 52 or 53, along came rock and roll, and other stations in town would start giving money away, along with the rock music that have lucky house number, lucky car number, lucky this, lucky that. But we hired a young man by the name of Bob Montgomery, and we called him Big Bill Cash. And we fought fire with fire.
This is Bill Cash speaking. Can you identify the Cash on the Line mystery sound? It will mean $1,000 cash to you.
Now, I gave away $34,000 over a 5-month period. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot today, but that was a lot of money then, and it staved off the stealing of listeners by other stations with giveaways. Now, we instituted a cash club. You send in a postcard, we'll draw a card a day and award $100, $200, $300. Well, boy, that was exciting, but you had to call the station after you heard your name within 5 minutes. Well, most people were listeners. They wouldn't have sent the card in. We got 500,000 postcards in 6 months, more than any other promotion by any other person or event in the history of the station, still now in 60 years today.
Caterpillars do it soft and slow. Everybody does the creep.
Saturday afternoons on WCCO Radio sounded like a broken record. Hit after hit, counting down the top 50 tunes of the week. But rock and roll wasn't the only new kid on the block. That recent invention, television, meant more competition.
In the earlier 50s, television had started its growth, but at the same time, the number of radio stations started proliferating. When television, in the early 50s, at the start of television, there were about 1,000 radio stations in the United States. Today, there are nearly 10,000. So as a result, radio programming has become what we say more vertical instead of horizontal, special appeal programming.
Despite competition on all fronts, CCO still had something for everyone. Like a good friend, it was always there. From the aquatennial coverage to severe weather information, WCCO was out there recording history as it happened.
Every family felt we were part of their family. They would talk about the newspaper. They'd talk about the television, but it was always my radio. And it was always on CCO. People time and again would write and say, our dial never moves from 830, Howard. In fact, it's rusted there.
People's tastes and lifestyles also changed in the 50s. Transistor radios traveled in the car, to the beach, to the ballpark. CCO added more personalities to its impressive lineup. Howard Viken, Maynard Speece, Randy Merriman, Dick Chapman, Boone and Erickson.
By the end of the decade, WCCO claimed 55.8% of the audience, more than all the other stations combined. With a reputation like that, there was only one goal left: to get stronger.
Hey, shouldn't we lower the lights in here?
I beg your pardon? What for?
Well, folks usually don't get a chance to watch us do a Midwest Federal commercial.
Well, if they don't picture us in their mind's eye, what do they picture?
It's got to be the Midwest Federal Tree.
Oh, the Midwest Federal Tree, the good tree to come to for shelter,
Right.
the one that's been standing straight and tall since 1891.
Yep, and it's still growing strong and stable as ever.
Yeah, on the other hand, Charlie, what happens if they aren't thinking of the tree and they are thinking of us?
Like I said, Raj, we should have shut off the lights.
Off.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear.
Turbulent times, the 1960s. The nation was confronted with fads and far-out ideas. On the home front, soaps and comedy shows went off the air. Radio past dissolved into radio present. Politics was the big news of the day, and WCCO radio was there.
We had all kinds of hourly newscasts and more reporters, more equipment, and just started getting more involved. And I guess the start of it was the Humphrey Kennedy primary in Wisconsin. I was primarily involved in myself, chasing those two guys all over the state, and it was wild and woolly.
Then, on August 26, 1964, a senator from Minnesota made history.
That's right. Senator, just a moment. I'll interrupt you momentarily, Senator. We have a CBS Net Alert Bulletin coming up, and it is from Atlantic City. Senator, I believe you'll be able to hear this, too.
Well, Humphrey realizes that the reason he can't be reached is because he's on the phone talking to Boone and Erickson, and it was quite funny, and I remember the senator said, I better get off this line because I may miss the train.
The early 60s brought winds of change of another sort here in Minnesota. Professional sports, baseball, and football came to town.
And CCO got a jump on the Minnesota Twins action and pulled in their own pro team. Herb Carneal, Ray Scott, and of course, Halsey Hall.
And the strike on this. Come on, we gotta let them know what's going on here.
As I used to say, on a clear day, you can almost see the field with Halsey smoking that cigar in there. But he was a good baseball man and a fine person. And I don't think there'll ever be another like him.
They could decide the game right here.
Since its early days, CCO has been synonymous with sports coverage. Ray Christensen has been the voice of Gopher football for 34 years.
And he's still going, and he's still fighting, and he gets the first out, and it's still standing.
The fall of 1961 brought together the Minnesota Vikings and the announcing duo of Dick Enroth and Bill Daly.
And the ice is pushing against the interstate bridge with the water level right at road level and over the bridge on the Wisconsin side.
In 1965, WCCO won prestigious Peabody, DuPont, and Sigma Delta Chi awards for public service and natural disaster reporting. When the blizzard and tornadoes hit that year, CCO was prepared and covered the disasters like no other station could.
And this funnel you're watching now is a new one, is that right?
This is a new one. It's a new one. We heard it first, now we can see it. Moving toward Excelsior, I would say.
By the late 60s, almost 100% of American homes had radios. Even though the times they were a-changing, CCO had 68.1% of the audience, an unprecedented rating for any station in this market or the country. Like the calm after the storm, CCO rode the ratings crest right into the 70s.
There are 100 folks.
Radio in the 70s. There was adult contemporary, news talk, hard rock, soft rock, album-oriented rock, jazz, you name it, FM and AM radio had it. CCO took a risk in 1971 and hired a young announcer with a reputation for straightforward talk. Someone who could carry their image into the 70s.
Here at CCO, we're talking to people. And I really think that people want to hear the human voice, and they want to hear it with some intelligence. And I think perhaps that CCO approaches its audience with the idea that we're not talking down to them, that we're talking to them, with them. And we try to offer them a little bit more than the time and temp and the top hits of the day. We give them that, too.
The 70s was a time for most of us to adapt to the changes of the 60s and prepare for more in the 80s. But when the going got tough, it was nice to know that some things never change.
I think that's one of the saving graces of CCO radio, is that we haven't changed that much. We're always here. We're always doing the best job we can do, and that always becomes the best in town.
(1984). The baby boom generation comes of age. A phenomenon called breakdancing hits the Midwestern streets. And the economy fluctuates like Minnesota weather.
Just when you thought, what is this world coming to, you turn on the radio and you've got a friend.
But there are some tests that you can make just to see if indeed in your particular case you're better off. For example,
Oh, good, I like these kind of tests, yeah.
if you go to the supermarket and you give...
Well, we're the children of the 80s here, I think. That's what they like to think. And I think there'll always be a place for a station like WCCO to broadcast to a great number of ages and groups and kind of tax the imagination.
We get more calls and more letters from younger people. Yeah, I certainly hope that the baby boom generation is listening to us.
Here at CCO, we don't want to be behind or ahead of the times. We want to know what people are thinking and doing right now. We haven't changed our approach much. We've just gotten better at it.
News. In 1982, we journeyed along with the Viking ship Hjemkomst from Duluth to Bergen, Norway.
Weather. In 1983, we housed our young meteorology staff in the WCCO television building to give current local reports.
Public service. In 1983, we also co-sponsored the Metro Food Share program, providing food and clothing for the needy.
Community. In 1984, we saw the largest crowds ever at the Minnesota State Fair. And school closings remain a #1 priority.
Sports. Also in 1984, we helped organize and promote the Twin Cities Marathon, now in its 3rd year, the largest single spectator sports event in Minnesota, an annual event since 1982.
If you were to make up a dream radio station, create a dream radio station and make a list of the things that you would want in the way of power and resources and network and dial position and people and all the various elements of a radio station, WCCO radio just has them all.
Ratings consistently show that WCCO radio is one of the top major market stations in the country. But aside from all the new technology and changes going on all around us, WCCO is still successful today because of one thing: people.
We provide the personalities, you provide the audience. One-on-one communication that's personal, warm, and human. Like a good friend. That's real radio.
60 years strong.
Actual reports on insurance form. The guy was all over the road. I had to swerve a number of times before I hit him.
Chuck Willigren here on WCCO Radio's Top of the Morning Show. How you doing, buddy? This is Howard Viken speaking for the Kent Switch. The new chocolate chip cookie ice cream.
Well, great. I wish we could talk forever. This is great.
Hey, it was really nice. Thank you for inviting us over.
You're welcome. We'll see you.
This is Ruth Kozlak. Show is called CCO at Large. It's 6 minutes after 7 o'clock. And we have some light snow flurries.
Well, the Cannon Mets, we get calls from all over the place. And you fellas, why are you calling me? Spending all this money to call from Tokyo, Japan.
Well, Steve-O, we miss you. We're fans of yours from way back.
Do they have a WCCO-like radio station in Tokyo? Something that...
Well, if they do, I don't understand it.
Oh, I